So a little bit about Terry. Terry and I have known each other for, about 8 years now, 8 or 9 years.
Yeah.
First kind of started running across him at a couple of our lectures, and Joe had introduced me to him and started following your career and just had a huge trajectory. But he's got a really strong baseball background, like a number of our PTs in our clinics. And he played college baseball, was a pitcher and first baseman in high school, and then played at Finger Lakes Community College. And, he kind of, like, I think almost every PT, right? He ends up injured and kind of finds physical therapy. And I think kind of a really noteworthy thing about Terry, and he was really helpful in both for Joe Majette and Jordan Bork, two of our other baseball PTs, is he was the kind of the head PT and was the director of all rehab kind of operations at Driveline Baseball in Kent for quite a few years, and was nice enough to let our 5-6 therapists come down and shadow him and learn him. And it was really amazing when he decided to come treat closer to home here in Kenmore. So excited about that. He'll talk a little bit about some of the players he's worked with, but he's been, single A, double A, triple A, and then of course a lot of really well-known, recognizable names in Major League Baseball, and helping them, to meet those velocity, both launch velocity as well as off the mound, and just kind of really help them meet their goals. So just an amazing start to a career, and it's really fun to have you part of the group. So thanks for doing this tonight. Appreciate it after a long day of treating. And he's got a little one at home too. So this is a treat for us. So appreciate it.
All right. Let me share a screen, Ben.
Yeah, go for it. And we'll have links for Terry's bio and how to get a hold of Terry at the end, as well as on the YouTube details.
All right. Ready to roll?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, thanks, Ben. Thanks for everyone for joining us tonight. As he said, my name is Terry Phillips, physical therapist here at Lake Washington Physical Therapy in Kenmore. Really excited to talk to you guys tonight about just managing youth throwing athletes, something that, a lot of opinions out there, some potentially good, some potentially bad. Hopefully, I'm just here to give you like a little bit more information that you guys can utilize, take home to help work with your little ones. Oh, come on. Here we go. Okay. So Ben already kind of hit on a lot of this, but a little quick about me. Obviously grew up playing baseball, was fortunate enough to make it to the junior college level as a pitcher. Unfortunate enough that during that time, I sustained my second labrum injury and needed that repaired. And after that, basically right when it was on the wall, that baseball career was over. But again, fortunate enough that I got into physical therapy as a result of that, kind of just like guided me towards the field. Transferred to Ithaca College 2009 with my doctorate of physical therapy. Shortly thereafter, I moved out west, started working at Olympic Physical Therapy with the esteemed Joe Nance of the current Lake Washington Physical Therapy Kenmore, where him and I worked together for about a good 4 or 5 years. 2016, started working at Driveline Baseball. Moved there on a full-time basis in 2017. Really valuable time I spent there. If I'm going to go ahead and kind of blow smoke on my own backside here, but between that time, 2016, 2022, I probably evaluated more than 3,000 individual baseball players, anywhere from, middle school, elementary school, all the way up to major league MVPs, Cy Young winners, future Hall of Famers. So I feel pretty confident that during that time, there's probably not too many PTs that evaluate more individual baseball players than I did. And as you can kind of like see by the pictures here, early last year, I had a pretty major life event where we had the birth of our daughter. And at that time decided that the hour-long commute from Bothell to Kent each way was just not ideal for the family. So fortunately, like I said, the esteemed Joe Nance, he had an opening that has awesome clinic here where everyone has just been really great. And I've been here since last August. All right. So some key takeaways. First and foremost, I want to state that this was originally supposed to be just like, it was stated, I think, advertised as a baseball talk, but this is very much also a softball talk. And also I kind of put up a softball picture here. one of the first, one misconceptions is that like the softball throw or the softball pitch is somehow like less strenuous, less potentially injurious than the baseball throw. And when we're looking at the elbow, like, yeah, maybe sure. But for the rest of the body, the softball pitch is like equally as strenuous. So even though like what I'm going to be talking about tonight is mostly going to be kind of contextualized via baseball, this definitely applies to like your softball players of all levels. So kind of main points I want to get across tonight. I want to just first like hit on the injury rates that you see throughout like youth. It'll be youth baseball, but again, this is going to be very similar to softball as well. I want to talk about workload management, what that means, how that applies to young throwers. And then last, I want to just talk about athletic development too. Like how can we make these athletes better, just better athletes, period. Not just for the sake of performance, but also ideally try keeping healthier as well. All right, so I need to close out a couple windows here, move this around so I can see things. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, so let's talk about injury rates. A lot out there about, what the kind of the range is for like athletes getting injured with baseball, especially with the arm. I'm just going to kind of reference this one study because this ends up being like the middle ground. This is also done over the course of 10 years. Recent study that just came out. Basically what they did was they followed a bunch of like middle school and high school baseball players for 10 years. And obviously like very few of those athletes, if any, if I'm remembering correctly, actually lasted the 10 years. I want to say the average length of an individual player's career from them falling was about like 4.5, all the way up to around 7. But what they found was like of all these athletes that they followed, about 26% sustained arm injury at one point. And it should be noted that like arm injuries in this case was not just, oh, I have a sore arm, I need to take like 2 days off from throwing, or I couldn't pitch this one weekend. This was a significant enough injury where they had to go see an orthopedic, or they had to take like at least like 2 weeks off from throwing. So this wasn't, like I said, this was a pretty significant. Again, you can take this as a very high number, a relatively low number. I don't want to like necessarily quantify or qualify it. But like I said, 26% of the athletes in their playing careers during this 10-year study sustained injury. Additionally, around 6% end up requiring surgery. Again, not a like hugely high number in the grand scheme of things, but that's also something like we would like to see ideally less of. And then just for a reference too, as we move up in the ranks, roughly around like 25% of major league pitchers have had Tommy John surgery. All right. So again, at the youth level, not nearly as high as at the major league level, but again, this is still something pretty significant that we could hopefully try to improve upon. So traditionally, if you go to see any type of medical professional, PT, orthopedic, athletic trainer, coaches, there's like generally like kind of a hierarchy that has really been followed as far as like what, quote unquote causes injuries. And at the top of that hierarchy, as far as like not the most important, but still kind of gets like some blame, is like athletes being told that they're like weightlifting too much, or they're doing the wrong type of weightlifting. You shouldn't be bench pressing. You shouldn't be deadlifting. Again, not as much of a focus, but it's still something that like still gets commonly taught to athletes when like if they end up in a doctor's office, is that they need to either cut back or reduce their weightlifting. The next two are kind of the more common ones, kind of the middle of the hierarchy would be like generally just like throwing too much. Again, it's like almost like, yeah, well, obviously. But again, they don't really get too much more into detail besides saying, oh, well, you just need to like cut back on the throwing. You need to take 2, 3, 4 months off during the off season. I want to get, like I said, later on, give a little bit more like context about like what throwing too much may mean. And then last, everyone's favorite is mechanics. Every injury ever happened in the history of baseball has been the result of bad mechanics. Obviously, I'm joking here, but that's been kind of a main driver. I've had numerous referrals that have come to me for like 11, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds that have said, work on their scap strength, work on their rotator cuff strength, do some type of like flexibility training, and then focus on their mechanics. Again, that's a very nebulous term in itself, that again, we're actually not going to be focusing on too much tonight, because I think the actual hierarchy needs to be changed a bit. And I think the way we should more likely be viewing injuries is almost inverse. Where number one, I actually think we should be talking about like workload management, like kind of like the main part of the pyramid. Again, this includes like throw counts. This is where like the quote unquote throwing too much, may come into play. We're going to talk about that for the majority of our talk tonight. Second would be like talk about developing athletes. Again, making them stronger, making them faster, making them more powerful, and the result also making them more resilient too. I think these two components of this hierarchy are like just honestly like, especially since I've gotten back into like the general outpatient population, these two are like major things that are just essentially like missed upon. As far as like there's some focus here, some focus there, but there could be a lot of improvement with like workload management, athletic development before we even get into potential mechanics. And again, I'm not saying like mechanics mean absolutely nothing. There's definitely importance for them, but again, within the context of like helping injured athletes, I think we got that's really putting the cart before the horse as far as like not focusing on the athletic development or the workload management side of things first. All right. So workload management, shout out to Hansel from Zoolander, because this is also pretty hot right now.
That's in your reference.
More so, you'll hear it more often.
That's in your references, right?
Yeah. All right. Ready to get back into it?
Let's do it.
All right. We're recording?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. All right. So yeah, workload management. Most commonly, probably you'll hear this in regard to basketball, usually just people being grumpy that LeBron James took a game off. But what does it mean? It's really like a kind of encapsulating term as far as going beyond pitch counts. When we're talking about workload management, we're talking about what does that athlete's on-ramping look like? What does their actually pitch count look like? As far as how many pitches or total throwing volume and arm stress look like? How many are they playing multiple positions? Are they playing multiple teams? Are they throwing other like days throughout the week, or is it just during games and just during practice? And lastly, we also want to talk about like total body stress, because throwing is definitely not just an arm action. This is like full body that the body is going to respond to the amount of stress that's being placed on it with like such a high intensity activity. So break down the parts of this. We'll start with on-ramping. So on-ramping by definition is going to be the appropriate buildup of throwing volume and intensity so the athlete's ready to meet demands of their season. Basically what that means is giving enough time for the athlete to increase their amount of total number of throws, number of days that they're throwing, how hard they're throwing, and giving an appropriate amount of time to be able to do so. So kind of the reference I have here is just a picture of like a helicopter and an airplane. And for instances of where athletes are just taking like too short of an on-ramp, that's kind of what we refer to as like taking off like a helicopter. And commonly we'll see this in more like just straight up Little League, where season will start, around March. Generally there's gonna be like 3 weeks of practice, and then they go in like games 3, maybe in 4 days a week with so kind of start back at, like I said, the two pictures here between the helicopter and the airplane. And like I said, with the helicopter, that's like essentially if we're like on-ramping too quickly, where I tell people you're taking off like a helicopter. Commonly, we'll see this most often in Little League players where, they'll probably not throw much before their season starts. Then they have their first practice on March 1st. And then, like I said, they basically have like 3 weeks or so before their games start. And then they're already back in like 3, maybe even 4 games a week relatively quickly, especially with like rainouts out here too. So then that is just really not a lot of time for their arm to acclimate to like the stresses like that the season provides. And then again, that's just a very short buildup. Whereas what we want to see is more like, I tell people, taking off like like an airplane, where it's just a nice smooth ascension into the amount of stresses that is going to be like placed on them during the season. So generally for youth athletes, even before practice starts, you'd want to see at least like 4 weeks, ideally even closer to 8 weeks of a buildup. And again, this is gonna be more dependent on like what their throwing is actually gonna look like during the season. So actually I had wrote a blog for our website, probably like a month or two ago. Kind of laid out just some easy guidelines, but just like think about working backwards from like what does the beginning of like that player season looks like. Are they playing one game a week? Are they playing 2 or 3 games a week? Are they pitching? And then using that information and kind of just like deciding from there how long a buildup should I potentially have, so I know that like I'm giving enough time to get ready for the season. I'm not getting this big like helicopter spike in my workload. So next is going to be pitch counts. And then most commonly, we'll think of like pitch smart guidelines. I hope most everyone here is familiar with pitch smart guidelines, but if you aren't, they're basically like a set of like kind of like guidelines of like the amount of max pitches you can throw based off your age range, and then additionally like how many days of rest you should have based off how many throws that you have. I think they came out 2014, I want to say. And again, at face value, they're great. I like that there's guidelines as far as like limits as far as like what an athlete should throw. So coaches aren't just going to be like, or parents be like, yeah, he's ready to throw 125 pitches. I saw, Sandy Alcantara throw 130 last night, so he's going to throw at least 100. So I like that this like at least puts some guardrails on it. Kind of the main issues that I have with though, I think there could be better ways of doing this, but one of the main issues is just that like parents and coaches they neglect them. There's actually been studies that have shown around like 55% of parents and coaches just like actually just disregard the guidelines. That's not necessarily always like purposeful. A lot of times they just aren't even aware of them. But this is something that's like just generally like should not be okay. I know there's a lot of tournaments out there where they don't even like enforce the pitch smart guidelines. So that is like issue number one. That's not necessarily with like the guidelines themselves, but more so with the implementation.
You've probably seen this too, Terry, but like it seems like there's a lot of kids too that play on like a rec team, and then they play on a select team, and then it's almost like 2 pharmacists prescribing medication.
Yep.
It's like no one's talking to each other. So a kid's playing long toss and pitching extra innings and doesn't, the other coach doesn't know. So it's like you said, not always a coach neglect issue. It's sometimes just a lack of communication.
Yeah, it's tough. And like I said, by no means am I saying like there's easy answers to this. Like I said, it's fully tough. And again, I'm sitting here I'm literally actually sitting on a perch at the clinic right now. But again, there's ways that we can at least like be more aware, and a lot of it is going to start with like communication. But again, the other thing with the pitch smart guidelines, I actually think that they're too lenient with the days off of rest. So let's take an example of like an 11-year-old, where let's say they throw like a 25 pitch outing in roughly like 2 innings. Theoretically, if we're like actually following pitch smart guidelines, they could throw 2 innings Sunday, take 1 day off, come back on Tuesday, another 25 pitches, 2 innings, come back on Thursday, another 2 innings, another 2 innings again on Saturday. Via these guidelines, that's like totally kosher. That's totally fine. But like I said, that is like major league closers and relievers don't do something like that. They don't, like I said, they come in, they're throwing 1 inning, they're doing like 3, maybe 4 times a week, depending on who it is. So I'd actually think like especially for like the younger the athlete is, I think, 1 to 2 like high intensity days, like as far as like outings is concerned, should probably honestly be the max. Again, we're getting travel ball tournaments are obviously a very real thing. Again, this is easier said than done. But again, I think we just need to be more aware that more rest needs to be had from like what is going to be happening during like a pitching outing. And finally, as like Ben alluded to, this doesn't like take into account all the other throws that this athlete has. Like I said, there's multiple teams. Kids are playing multiple positions. This doesn't take into account like warm-up throws for like warming up for the game to go into the game. This doesn't take into account the pitches that they're throwing in between innings. So even if we just take like a standard like 35 pitch outing and assume this is like a starter that threw 2-3 innings, and they're probably throwing like another like 20, 25 in their bullpen before the game. They're probably throwing like 5 innings or 5 pitches in between each inning, and then like that 35 pitch outing very easily becomes 70 pitches. So again, there needs to be a little bit more tracking beyond just like the actual like pitch smart guidelines. And then with that, that kind of feeds the next part, is just like the total throwing volume. As I kind of alluded to earlier, a lot of times like our, the best pitchers on the team are also going to be the best players on the team. And usually the best players on the team are going to be playing outfield, center field. They're going to be playing shortstop, maybe third base, where those are going to be not only like high volume throwing, but they're also going to be like high intensity throws too. So that's going to be weighted more than just like kids that are going to go play first base after they're done pitching. And actually, this is what like brings up to another study that was done just recently, a couple months ago in March, where they actually followed like an 11U team, and they had them wear inertial sensors around their arms. And what they found was that for all the kids that pitch, I want to say it was like of the 12 kids, 11 of them ended up pitching during the season. The average pitching outing was 36 pitches per an outing. What they found for those kids that threw whenever they had their outing, the average, again, this is the average, total amount of throws was 158 total throws. That is a exceedingly high amount of throws.
That is a lot of throws.
That is a lot. And I'll show this even more later. That is a ton of throws. And even to clarify, this only included like 2 tournaments. So again, that does bump up, but probably like on those tournament days, that's even more throws. So this wasn't like skewed terribly by like just like a bunch of tournaments, and like the average was a lot less. This is no way, any way you slice it, this is a ton of throws for a pitcher to be having, like a youth pitcher to be having on any given day. But also separate from that, even the kids that didn't pitch, they still average like around 120 throws on a given day. And this isn't all just like low intent, like nice and easy throwing, like getting warmed up. About a third of those were low intent, just throwing nice and easy. Half of those or so, a little bit more, were kind of getting your medium intent, and 15% were still high intent throws. So if you're taking like a non-pitcher on average day, he's still getting in like roughly like 20 high intent throws in a given day. That's a good amount of stress on the arm. So again, that's another thing we need to be taking into account when we're asking like to that player to go into, pitch at some point later in that game or later in the tournament. And finally, last thing we need to be considerate of is just like the total body stress. Again, this isn't anything groundbreaking, but like throwing and hitting are full body activities. And I think this picture is actually a really good example. This isn't obviously just like arm stress. Like he's got his pelvis rotate one way, he's got his torso rotate the other way. He's got a nice long stride. This is a full body activity. So the body needs to recover from like a high intensity, high volume, outing, whether that's, again, a lot of throws from the infield or, like I said, most commonly going to be in pitching. And then we need to take that account, especially when we're getting into tournaments or we have like a lot of games in the course of a week. So let's say we have a kid that throws, we have 2 kids, and we'll say this isn't a tournament. One kid throws 40 pitches in game 1, and then another kid plays center field and then throws 40 pitches in game 2. The kid that threw 40 pitches in game 2 is essentially going to have like more weighted stress like on his arm during those, like from those 40 pitches, because he already has like the fatigue starting to set in from like the previous game 1. So again, just another thing that needs to be accounted for. I know I'm throwing like more things at you guys to check off, but we can't just say, okay, well, so-and-so, I'm going to use the term little Johnny. Little Johnny only threw 40 pitches, so he's obviously good to go in a couple of days. But it's like, well, also little Johnny was playing outfield and shortstop, and then also probably playing catch with his dad, like the previous days leading up to this, again, which is, again, that's discussion to be had. So maybe he's not actually ready to be going in for those 40 pitch outings, even though it's been, according to like pitch smart guidelines, he should be good to go from his previous outing. So next, I'm going to kind of just show like an example. This is an actual example of a patient I had. And I got permission from his dad to use this. Him and I have known each other for a long period of time. I have a really good relationship. And I'm using this not necessarily to like, obviously this isn't a rag on a dad. This is more just show. This is what I'm commonly seeing for like kids that are coming in. This is just like his week schedule that he had in March. Then Saturday and Sunday were a tournament. And on Saturday, he threw 2 innings, 24 pitches, played second base the rest of the day. Sunday, he actually warmed up to pitch, which again, in of itself, that's already starting to be a potential pitch smart violation if we're looking at it that way. But then he went and played second base and outfield for us today. Monday, he had 25 throws of his dad. Tuesday, he just did 25 throws to the wall on his own. Also, he's 12, and this is self-reported 25 throws, so there might be a little fluctuation there. Wednesday at practice, he went through the hitters again, 35 pitches, live at bats, so probably like 2 or 3 innings there. Thursday, another 25 throws to the wall. Friday, he was off. Saturday, came back and pitched in. I can't remember if this was actually a tournament or just a doubleheader, but he pitched 2 innings again and went and played second base and left field for the rest of 2 games. So again, if we're just taking this at a quick glance, we're like, okay, they're all kind of quick, short outings. He was only in for 3 games, no more than 35 pitches. So obviously, like, this is good to go. But then if we're considering, like I said, that study from March that showed like an average outing on pitching days is 158 throws, this is going to be skewed pretty different. So then I'm being conservative here on the estimation here, but then let's what more look like where it's Saturday, 125 throws, Sunday, 125 throws, Monday, Tuesday, 25, Wednesday, probably another 100, 125, Thursday, 25, Friday off, Saturday, another 125. So like in this week's time, he has like 4 high volume days. But then he also, within that, again, he had the 3 outings, but he also had a day where he was warming up to go in a game. That's another high intensity day. So he has 4 high intensity, high volume days over the course of like 7 days.
Yeah, comparatively, I think you're going to probably like allude to this too, but this is also someone who's musculoskeletally still not a mature.
Yes.
Yet. So there's still plates that haven't closed. And
so I consider putting, I'm going to have a reference for this, but I actually consider this pointing in. I looked up like the most used, whatever relievers had the most innings pitched or most appearances last year, and number 1 was Emmanuel Clase from the Guardians. I apologize. And he had basically his outings were he averaged like 1 inning per outing. He had 77 innings and 70 outings or something like that. His highest workload weeks were 4 outings in a week. And this is the Guardians in a pennant race in September, and he's still like not throwing. He's generally, for the rest of the season, he's not getting like 4 high intensity outings. Again, that's a major league, one of the best closers in the big leagues in a pennant race in September. And this is just like what I'm commonly seeing for 11 and 12-year-olds. So this is going to be kind of like a more like specific example. This is a pitcher that trains at Driveline. He is a indie ball reliever, throws upper 90s. So even though he's not in the big leagues, he is for all intents and purposes an elite thrower. Again, as a reference, I kind of referenced earlier, he started his on-ramp in September. All right. And this is what his April looks like. So this is 5 months of on-ramping. And you can just look at, this is basically, so this is going to be a quick plug for Driveline Pulse. It is a very, very awesome wearable sensor that basically counts all throws, but also counts as like how many, like the intensity of the throws. So it can give you like a workload prescription essentially, as far as like what you've done for the week, what your throwing should like going for like the next days going forward. And it keeps track of all of it for you. So this is just like, again, this is that in itself, which again, we can talk about that later. That is a very good, good solution for like the problem of like trying to figure out workload for like any thrower. And all athletes at Driveline, and I know there's actually some PTs on this call that utilize this. Shout out to Scott. But this is, like I said, this is this pitcher specific pitch counts or throw counts for the week. So you kind of see like he only has like 3 days at most each week where he exceeds, 50 something throws. Highest throw count he has is 148. And again, if we're going back to that study with the 11U team, the average throw count was 158. And I can also tell you too, even though like he has the higher like volume days, just knowing how Driveline trains their athletes, this pitcher only had like 2 high intensity days during this, like any one of these given weeks. So we'll take this example of like the week of April 2nd through the 8th. Probably came in, probably threw on his own on Sunday, had a real low intensity, low volume day. Monday, probably threw like a bullpen or had a pitch design session. Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday, we're going to be low intent, low recovery or low volume days. This day, Wednesday, would be more considered a moderate intensity days. So he's not really throwing higher than like 75% intensity. All right. So it's still a high volume, but a little bit less of a total overall workload for him. And then Friday probably came back around and threw like a bullpen or a pitch design day. So, and that's like, this is him getting ready for the season, ramping up for the season, getting his arm as prepped as appropriately on ramped as we possibly can be. And then just for comparison, this is like the sample 12-year-old, where I like just add in that conservative throw count amount for just his given week. And this is the like indie ball guy's like throw counts for the entire month of April. So you can actually just take like these days here as like 1 week. Again, he has 1, 2, 3 high intensity days. This kid had 4 high intensity days, and like 4 of them were also 4 high volume days, but they're also high intensity. So again, once again, just hammer it home. This is a indie ball guy that throws 97 and 99 miles an hour, is in his early 20s after 5 months of on-ramping. And this is a 12-year-old in March. And this is like common.
That's a great visual.
So now that I've really hammered home workload management, let's move on to athletic development. Not going to talk about this quite as much, but I still want to definitely like hammer home its importance for you guys. So we want to talk about like why it's important, and we also want to talk about how we can work on it. Again, it's not going to take as long, but this is still very, very important.
And we did have a question on this, Terry, that I'll give you at the end of this portion, which I think will follow through, kind of have a nice connection.
Okay, awesome. So athletic development, basically, like I said, just trying to get athletes stronger, faster, more powerful, more flexible, better balance, whatever have you. From a health perspective, there's been multiple studies showing that youth athletes who have better strength, better core stability, better balance, better flexibility, just generally tend to get injured less than their peers. A lot of those studies like get very granular and very specific and they'll say stuff like, oh, these athletes that did this like scap strengthening program got hurt less, or the athletes that did this like core strengthening program got hurt less. Athletes who stretched out more got hurt less. Which like, and then the takeaways that you should do these programs, but you can generally like get the same exact results just by being on a good like strength and conditioning program. And obviously that varies a lot between like age groups, what that's going to look like. But like I said, this is like comes down to the crux of like athletic development. Do things that are going to like build up these qualities, and that should help with the overall health of your throwers. From a performance perspective, at Driveline, we had a lot of a lot of things within our assessment. From the high performance strength conditioning side of things, we use a lot of force plate tests, where we basically had like athletes do various jumps, jumps where they go down and then come back up. One where they just started from the bottom, jumped up, some continuous hops. We did some strength tests where we just like basically pushed our feet in the ground, holding that bar as hard as you possibly could. And basically from the information, we just got a lot of different input about like their different like athletic qualities. And the number one quality that we found, again, this is separate from like also like range of motion testing and like PT testing and like manual muscle testing that we did with myself or with the other strength coaches. But the absolute number one thing that we found was a predictor for both bat speed and throwing velocity was peak power. And by peak power, I just mean that athlete's ability to put force into the ground and do that quickly. So if you think, if you compare, we'll just use myself versus Shohei Ohtani, there is going to be a lot more power demonstrated by Shohei on a force plate testing than there is going to be myself. And that is definitely the only thing that separates the two of us, nothing else. But no, so that, again, this just shows, like I said, we can rant on this for a long period of time, but at the end of the day, to get our athletes to move up in the game, we want to try to keep them as athletic as possible. There's obviously a very strong skill component to that, But at the major league level, all those athletes were like the best players on their college team, the best athletes on their college team. At the college level, generally, they were all the best players, best athletes in their high school team. At the high school level, they were the best players, best athletes growing up. So the common theme, like as we move up through the game, is like being very good, like, obviously you're a good baseball player, but just being like very good athletes that like demonstrate high levels of power, strength, flexibility, speed. All right, so how can we work on it? And like I said, this obviously is going to be very different, from 9, 10-year-olds up to, versus 15, 16-year-olds. And we don't want to, especially the younger age, we don't want to make this boring. Like doing stuff like, fielding defenses is boring enough. We want to do stuff that's like fun and engaging, is encourage them to like compete really hard, but also like encourage them like express like those athletic qualities like we talked about, with speed, power, strength, and agility. So at the younger level, like I definitely encourage any games that are going to just have them sprint, jump far, jump fast. You can do stuff where they're just carrying heavy objects, just climbing things, all like the basic stuff that like, generally kids should be doing and should be doing from multiple sports. That just is very, very difficult from just like the youth travel sports model now. We can still get in like in practices, whether it's off season or in season. Obviously, like this should vary a bit more depending on when the season is, but it can still be worked on consistently. And we should do so not necessarily just like, do the same thing over and over and like get really good at that one skill, but like do it in a variety of manners. I referenced it, I'll show this video by this guy out of Wisconsin, Carter Schmitz, who he just trains golfers mostly. But he just posts videos of his warm-ups on his Instagram. And like they're awesome because like the kids are, as I'll demonstrate here, they're just playing tag right here. And they're just running around, they're running hard, they're changing direction, they're putting force in the ground to change direction hard. And like letting around you, this is golf practice. And then look at this kid in the black shirt, like the positions he's getting into. Again, this is a golfer. This kid is going to hit like absolute bombs like, as he gets older. All right. So again, this doesn't need to be the whole practice. Like I said, Carter uses a warm up. You can do this as like a cool down where you just like, again, have the kids play tag. Maybe one that we used to do at Driveline a lot was have someone be the quarterback, have 2 kids, ideally of relatively equal athletic capabilities, like one be a wide receiver, one be a cornerback. You're getting speed, you're getting power. If they're getting a little physical with it, you're getting change of direction, just like stuff that's just going to carry over. And then they're competing, so they're going to be doing it higher outputs than if you're doing it in in a like drill type setting. All right, that's all I got for you guys today. What questions we got, Ben?
Yeah, we got this first question is from Heather, and she said her 9-year-old is really loving pitching as he's just starting out his journey. What is your guidance to help him build strength and not overthrow to cause issues down the road? Which I think you've kind of covered some things there, but are there any pearls that you have such a great experience to kind of call upon? Is there anything that kind of comes to mind?
Yeah. So this is going to get me crucified for off the bat here. Let him throw hard. So there's this concept that, like, again, this goes back to mechanics stuff, the question. There's this idea that like good mechanics need to happen before a kid can ever like try to throw a baseball hard. But as I showed, that's also why I showed in that study, kids still throw the baseball hard in games, whether or not it's off the mound, whether they're playing shortstop, whether they're playing outfield. And then to further that, again, this should be done in like not every day, obviously. But I said, it shouldn't be like shied away from to tell a kid like go play long toss like once or twice a week. Again, this is gonna be depending on like what they have like for their game schedule, like when it is in the season. But like there's a component where like kids just need to like figure out how to throw. And again, so commonly we try to get kids to like, we try like teach them how to throw. And we think that kids are just small adults, and we can give them like small internal cues where like we're telling them move their body part in this way, move their other body part in that way. And then that's going to somehow lead to like high outputs. And by outputs, I mean like throw the ball hard, throw the ball fast. But that's like a skill that needs to be developed. And again, we hit on the athletic development side of things as far as like, just like, you know, go run around, play tag, climb things. But like, it can't be undermined, like how much repetition it takes to like become like an efficient thrower. Right. And this is why you don't really, you know, one of the reasons why you just don't see, you know, guys throw, you know, in their, you know, into the mid 90s to like they're later in their 20s, you know, because I said there is like the strength and, you know, power side of things, but again, it just takes a lot of throws, a lot of repetition, and not so much in a manner where it's like in the context of a game. This is like to go out, have him go play with his buddies and just like make games up where he's just trying to throw from different arm angles and like, you know, pretending like he's a shortstop, trying to like do like a Derek Jeter type throw, like jumping off one leg. The more like problems that you give him to solve, the more calibrate he's going to get on the actual like skill of throwing itself.
You know, I think you had a great point too, and that's overall you have to keep it fun. I know you and I have seen so many of these kids that they burn out by age 15, 16 because it's felt like a job since they were 9.
Yeah.
Versus it being fun until they're 13, then they get serious and, you know, really take it to that next level.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was a question that was sent in by one of my friends who's a coach, and he says, when should a parent or coach refer an athlete to a healthcare provider or PT? You know, kind of that. When should they go the PT route? Obviously, you and I are both PTs and kind of biased.
Yeah.
But when if you're a coach, when is that kind of red line in the sand?
This is actually a tricky one. And then actually like Jordan Bork and I actually have had these discussions before when Jordan was working with like at the Driveline Academy. Because there's definitely like it's unavoidable. Like kids are going to have like arm soreness, arm pain to an extent. And when that is actually becoming an issue is it's you know, it's not set in stone. My rule of thumb generally is like, you know, roughly like a week of having things that aren't settling, where like it starts like impacting your throwing to the point where like, hey, I can't play shortstop today, or I can't play third base today. I need to play first. You know, days, especially out the course of a season, especially kids are playing. You know, I got a kid that's coming off a stress fracture, and he's going to have 10 games in 10 days. There's an expectation that like the arm is going to get sore from that. But when it starts becoming like a point where you are like altering your throwing for probably more than the course of the week, probably that's when the time it is to go see a PT. You know, again, like I said, there's still gonna be days here and there where it's just like, yeah, I need a day to like, I can't pitch today, or I need a day to, you know, play first base. But that doesn't mean like the first day that happens that you have to go see a PT for that.
You know, I think like your point earlier on the slide deck too was great, because like to have some kind of guardrails and kind of formula, I think is super helpful. Because when I was playing and pitching and even playing quarterback, like you didn't take days off from throws unless you were my coach would push in on your elbow, and if your elbow was sore, then you took it kind of a light day. But if it hurt while you threw, you just still threw.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, I mean, it was a phenomenal amount of balls that you're pushing out there.
Yeah.
Here's kind of a question from one of the other PTs in our group. What is the best way to send a client over to you? Is it best to email, call, text, and fax? And we could kind of make that more broadly to any PTs outside our group that, you know, they can do general sports medicine, orthopedics, but then they want someone that can really look at a baseball player. What's the best way to kind of reach out to you?
They can, I mean, for me specifically, I'd say email me. You know, every PT is going to have like kind of like their line in the sand will say about is how they want to be reached out to. Yeah, like I said, you can call the clinic, you know, call any clinic and just say, you know, dirty little secret. Most clinics are going to say they have a baseball expert. But you can always like go onto that clinic's website and kind of read their bios, and then just get an idea for yourself. If it doesn't feel right, then, try check someplace else out. I might do like some searching. I know pretty much all the PTs, like got a guy that I would, or person I would like trust in baseball. And if you have any questions, if anyone's like that you're not sure about, you can always like reach out to me specifically. I have a pretty decent network just from my time, just from being PT in general for 13 years now out here. And then definitely like from people I've been able to meet at Driveline. So even if you're not up in the Kenmore area or Kirkland area, you should be able to find someone that's, within a reasonable drive for you guys.
Do you have I know we talked about some of the play in games and that sort of thing, but do you have a favorite drill that coaches can integrate into a practice? Maybe that was kind of a general question, maybe based around velocities or something that you like.
I would say, so just like easiest one is going to be just long toss. Again, that's another thing that like medical professionals as a whole will generally like somewhat vilify, not as much as like other velocity enhancement drills or methods. But like, and there's something to be said, especially like when we're talking about like even command training, that throwing a ball to a target that's for a kid 150 feet away, an older kid 250 feet away, that's command training, but it's also just like building up a lot of arm fitness. So again, we're for our driveline athletes, they're long tossing 3-4 days a week. For like a younger kid, again, this is gonna be context dependent of like when they are in the season. If they have like, again, 6 games in 5 days, they maybe like long toss someone as they're warming up for a few of their games, but they don't need to go out and like try to do more throws from a long distance. That's honestly like probably like one of the easiest ones, and like again, that's probably not utilized enough, and that will really go a long ways in like just developing like good throwers, because that's like the term is going to be like self-organization there, where like not necessarily the first time, second time, third time, but eventually like, the kid's going to figure out like, how do I get this ball to this distance, right? Yeah. Like the most efficient way, which is always, it is a perhaps like it's a slower way of going about it, but that's going to allow them to express like their true athleticism, as opposed to like trying to coach a kid to like do the right, this small person that we think are like small adults, which they aren't. They have like entirely different like motor patterns that they're trying to still learn and work through. Generally trying to like cue them up to a point where like they're like give them like various just directions is not going to lead to like the most athletic version of themselves.
No, I've noticed that just in my son's practices, like when you do long toss, you don't even have to tell them to lift up the left leg and drive with the left arm, because you're going to figure out very quickly that that's the only way to get the ball across.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a fun thing.
Yeah.
Here's kind of a controversial question, as they all are, but maybe getting your opinions on how important it is to play other sports, and at what age would you have an athlete specialize?
So this is a very loaded question that has like a lot of answers. That has like is not the short answer. Again, I apologize. A lot of my answers are preference. Like I'm different from, like I'm not trying to be Batman PT here and everything's just extremely rogue. But the traditional like answer is going to be play as many sports as long as you can, and like develop, and like in a vacuum, that idea is great, because like, yes, kids should be like learning like new motor patterns. Kids should be like having different problems they have to solve, developing different qualities. Each sport is going to like be biased towards different qualities, but every sport is insane. Like after the age of 9 or 10, like every sport is just like absolutely off the wall insane for like the schedule. And that goes back into like the full body stress side of things that I was talking about, where like, yeah, in theory, having a kid play 3 sports is awesome, but then he's playing 3 year-round sports. And then after 3 years of doing that, he hates them all, because he's just burnt out, because he's never had a day to actually just like hang out and relax and like play with his friends. Which again, no easy answer here. I mean, the easiest answer is to like make travel ball legal and reduce the amount of like tournaments kids can play, and like actually make seasons like 4, 5, 6 months again.
Seasons or seasons.
Yeah. Make seasons actually seasons. But again, it's just hard. And again, you know, I don't have a good and appropriate answer of like, when is it time to specialize? Like I said, there's definitely a component where it's a double-edged sword, where the kid baseball, especially baseball, is very skill dependent. And the kids who get more exposure to that skill is the other side of the coin of like, yes, they have to be good athletes, but they also have to have a lot of skill. The current youth model just like really biases towards that skill. And that skill is like, that skill they develop is generally going to like push them up in the game for a long period of time. The kids that continue to go up are the ones that are already like generally like athletically gifted. So it just puts like a hard cap on a lot of other people.
Yeah, one thing we've kind of noticed, and I think this is probably true for a lot of parents on the call tonight, is that you're kind of forced into a specialization model.
Yeah.
Because the rec teams start to deteriorate on the quality very quickly. And so then a kid like when you and I were growing up, you know, probably wouldn't have been select, now is moving up to a select team. So then the rec team quality, much like you see in the classrooms with like accelerated classes, like if you lose all the like the pretty good people, then the team kind of falls apart. And then there's not enough teams like not enough players to feel a team, or you know, we had that. We're starting to see that happen even like age 8 and 9. In our cases.
And that's why I'm such a big proponent of like the athletic development stuff we talk about in practice. That's like just recognizing that it's the world we live in, as far as like kids, to play more than one sport is very hard in itself. To play more than 2 sports is pretty much impossible.
It is.
And kids need to get their like development in somewhere somehow. So like, yeah, they don't need to maybe go play like in a soccer league, but maybe like that's your conditioning or like your end of the game practice. The kids just go play soccer.
Right.
So they're still like, they're specializing, but they're still getting like other like, exposures in.
I think that's a great point. Do you have a most memorable case that you can share? You don't have to use names unless you want to, but
most memorable case, recent memory, had this kid who came out to Driveline. He called me. He called me out 2-3 years ago. Just kind of like want to get in contact. He had a scholarship to pitch for LSU. If anyone's familiar, LSU's I think currently number 1 team in the country. And he was a lefty. Got there in the fall, started having arm issues, shoulder issues, just progressively got worse. He ended up having like 6 or 7 MRIs, and had tried like a lot of different things. Nothing was helping. Was just basically like he was done and had like been playing football for a year at the JUCO in California that he was at. And then he just decided he was going to like give one more shot. And he gave me a call and just like kind of told me what was going on. And I was as honest as I could be. I was like, I don't know. like I don't know if we can help you. Based off what you're telling me, he told me this whole story, laid it out for me. I was like, based off what you're telling me, I think, there's nothing that you're telling me at your age that makes me think that your shoulder is done. So, I'm not going to sit here and make promises that you're going to come out and you're going to be back to yourself, but, I think we can make it work. And then he ended up coming out, ended up getting back, thrown up to 94 miles an hour. Last I heard, he was pitching at a junior college, in California.
That's quite a journey, quite an arc.
Yeah.
We have a lot of prospective PTs on the call, both in PT school as well as looking at PT school. What's your favorite part about being a PT?
Just meeting different people, honestly. Like obviously like helping people out is great and cool. But just having exposure to like different people and like just learning about them, and just just conversing with like different backgrounds. Even in Kenmore, like a lot of people that have like grown up in Kenmore, but you still like get a lot of interesting a lot of just like interesting personalities, interesting histories. When I was at Driveline, was working with people from teenagers from like Korea. So I've been fortunate to like just meet a lot of like very interesting, very cool people during my time here, and that's like, in regardless of like your setting, that's just definitely one of the best parts of the job. And the other best part I'd say is just like if you can just like give people that aha moment of like, oh, maybe I'm not like this kid in that is represented, like, oh, maybe I'm not doomed. Like,
no, giving people a sense of hope is
exactly.
Goosebumps, right?
The sense of hope is like that is like one of the coolest things you can possibly do for people.
It's pretty magical. Do you have any advice to those DPT students right now while they're in school?
Well, it's probably, if you're already in DPT school, it's probably too late, but go to the cheapest school you can find. If you are already in a PT school, don't stress yourself out by like studying absolutely nonstop and developing no social skills, because like the number one thing that is will get your clients better is that they like you.
Yeah.
So if you're just like this, if you're just some weirdo that like can't like that just can't communicate with people, you're gonna have a tough time regardless of like what techniques like what anatomy things you just gotta be able to just like just BS with your clients, and then just get them to enjoy you, and just like learn about them, and just show them that you care, and that's what's going to make your patients better regardless of anything else that you do.
I think there, like they call it soft skills, but I think there's got to be a study that comes out at some point that basically shows how well you get better if you like your PT.
I think there was a study that was like,
okay.
It was something like 3 out of 10, like 30% better comparison to like if you just enjoyed like your experience, something on those lines.
That would make sense to me. Yeah. If you go back in time here, what do you miss most about being the head PT at Driveline? You got to work with some amazing MLB guys.
that was definitely very awesome. But I honestly just miss like it was like a team environment. It was just like a team environment. Just baseball in of itself is competitive. And the whole industry is competitive in one way or another. And Driveline, being at the position that they're at is like, far as like one of the leaders in the industry of like new age baseball training techniques. There was a lot of like, there was like a sense of like trying to like uphold that, and then also a sense of like wanting to like show our quote unquote haters, show them wrong. Didn't spend too much time. Well, I don't want to say we didn't spend too much time on that, but there's like it's just like, for lack of a better term, it's like almost like you're like almost going to battle like every day. That's like kind of like over dramatic, but there's an aspect of that like we just had like a team focus of like, let's push the game forward, and like
you got a mission, right?
Yeah, and there's like a lot that entailed. And then with that though, but then like just with like the athletes that were coming, that's that's mainly for the employees, but just like the athletes that are coming in, it's just like, again, it was just like another aspect of like being on a team of like, these were the guys that, again, I'm 38 and these are mostly like 20 something year olds. So I'm like the old guy trying to be like, hey, what's up, fellow kids? But
keeps you young.
But there's something that has to be said about like just seeing these guys every single day. For me, it was 5 days a week. And then just like getting to know them, and just like being a face for them, and just letting them know that like I was a resource for them, and like I cared about them. It's like that's something I alluded to earlier. Like it's cool here, but like is I get to do that like 1 or 2 times a week for my patients, but like it's I don't know, it's just like it's a little bit different type of like coolness when it's you see these guys every day, and like they're they're coming from Pennsylvania or whatever. And they're just like out here, just like trying to, get their game going, get their baseball career going for another couple of years.
Well, I think you did a great job. Like I think you and I've talked about it, but one of my first jobs when I came out was the Mariners home clinic. So we saw Mariners, and I think that you kind of helped elevate the game. And I'm not just saying that because you're on the call, but I've told Jordan this too, is that I think you've elevated the game for PTs in baseball. Because when I was working with them, a PT's input didn't have the value that it does now. Like the pitching coach, everyone mattered way more. They didn't do strength training to any level or any capacity really. Because it was always kind of funny because we'd have NFL guys in and we'd have Major League Baseball guys in, and the NFL guys are just, always having to work out, and like the baseball guys are like, well, that's completely changed now. For survival and for competition as well. I want to hold you too late, so I appreciate your time. We got a couple of quick lightning round questions. These were sent in ahead of time as well. Favorite team?
Minnesota Twins.
Ooh, my wife will like that. Favorite pitch?
Fastball thrown as hard as you can, right down the middle.
Four seam?
Yeah.
Good. Most memorable baseball game you ever played in?
Probably two. I had a game where I struck out 15 guys. Well, I'll say three. I had one game where I struck out 15 guys. I had another game where we were playing our crosstown rivals, and I hit 6 guys, and I also hit a home run. And then I ran around the bases as quickly as I possibly could.
head down.
I just figured I was due. I asked the catcher who was it was like in our Legion team. I asked the catcher, I'd already hit like 4 or 5 guys at this point. And the catcher was like my high school catcher. And I go, I'm probably gonna get hit here, aren't I? He just goes, yeah. And then I hit my only home run of the season in that at bat, and then booked it around the bases and came back in. And then last one, we in high school we won our school's like first like county championship ever. So that was pretty awesome.
That's super special when you can kind of raise a banner. Favorite teammate?
So I'm gonna go twofold on this. One, probably my friend Joe Napoleon, who is actually I grew up playing with him from middle school, high school. We were captains together. I was in his wedding. He was in my wedding. He is in the PT class ahead of me at Ithaca. And he has 3 clinics in the greater Troy, New York area.
Wow.
Him and his wife, who is also in the class ahead of us. So he is probably my favorite baseball teammate of all time. If any of you know me, I've been playing slow pitch softball since I moved out here. Probably got a group of like 5 or 6 of us that I played with for the last decade plus. And just like, I just love playing. Like, it's a co-ed team. I love playing with those guys, and my wife is included in that.
That's good. That's smartly done. If you only could have, this is a PT question, desert island exercise. You got one exercise that you can give a patient or give yourself on a deserted island. What are you doing?
If I'm getting a patient, I'm going to go deadlifts. If I'm going myself, bench press.
Okay. I like it. You got to look good on the beach if you're on an island. All right. Well, I can't thank Terry enough for doing this tonight. Terry was our first in-house PT to do this for us, to do a webinar. And so it's super exciting. And we'll hopefully bring more of our specialties, because so many of our therapists have really unique backgrounds, really unique sports histories, as well as their niches that they love to treat. So you can let your friends or colleagues and other teammates know that the video will be posted on our YouTube channel tomorrow. We'll try to cut out some of the video outage. We'll get that going. We'll monitor, if you can, again, make sure to like and comment. That just helps it get to more viewers. And then we already talked about the best way to get in touch with Terry. That's via his email. You can find that on the website. He also has a Twitter handle, which is
Go with my Instagram, which is I believe it's terry.phillips.dpt.
Okay.
I'm not currently as active as I previously have been, just on account of baby life,
That will do it.
documentation. At some point I'll get back on it. But when I was posting, really, I think it was pretty good content.
Yeah. No, he's got.
I still share a lot of stories that posts that I think are like very, very relevant to both baseball and PT.
Yeah, he usually has good stuff on both research as well as exercises and stuff, which is pretty cool. So thank everybody for coming out tonight and making time in their busy schedules to watch this. And thanks again, Terry. And hope everyone has a great season. So we'll talk soon.